The engine screamed. The controls shook. And Lieutenant James Holden knew he had maybe 8 seconds to live. 2 Focke-Wulf 190s sat behind him, close enough that he could see the flicker of their gun muzzles in his mirror. A third dove from above, cutting off his escape. His wingman was gone. His squadron was scattered, and every instinct screamed at him to push the throttle forward and run. Instead, he did something that would have gotten him court-martialed in training. He pulled the throttle back. What happened next would be studied in fighter tactics courses for the next 30 years. If you want more true stories of impossible moments from World War II, subscribe to the channel. The date was March 14th, 1944. The place was the skies over northern France, 30 miles inland from the coast. The mission was supposed to be simple. Escort a formation of B-17 bombers to their target, keep the German fighters off them, and come home. But the Luftwaffe had other plans. The German pilots that morning were not rookies. They were experienced, aggressive, and flying some of the fastest fighters in the European theater. They had altitude, they had numbers, and they had spotted a straggler. Lieutenant James Holden was 23 years old. He came from a small town in Iowa where the loudest sound most mornings was a rooster. He had joined the Army Air Forces in 1942, trained in Texas and California, and arrived in England 4 months earlier with the 356 Fighter Group. He flew a P-47 Thunderbolt, a plane built like a battering ram, heavy and tough, but not known for elegance. Holden was quiet. He read manuals in his bunk while other pilots played cards. He asked questions that annoyed the older pilots, questions about energy states and turn radii and deflection angles. His squadron commander once called him more librarian than fighter pilot. The other men tolerated him. Some even liked him, but none of them thought he would last long. He had flown 16 missions without a single kill. Not because he was a coward. He simply had not been in the right place at the right moment, and in a unit where kills were currency. That made him invisible. On the morning of March 14th, Holden was assigned to fly as number 4 in a 4-plane flight. The least important position, the spot reserved for rookies and men no one trusted to lead. The bomber stream stretched across the sky like a long, slow river of metal. The B-17s held their formations tight, their gunners scanning for threats. The P-47s orbited above and around them, weaving back and forth to keep their speed up. Holden flew on the outside edge of the formation, his eyes moving in the pattern he had been taught. Check 6. Check high. Check the sun. Check 6 again. The radio crackled with chatter. Call signs. Vectors. Altitude checks. Then a new voice cut through, sharp and urgent. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. For plus. Holden looked up and to his left. He saw them. Dark specks against the pale winter sky, diving fast. Focke-Wulf 190s. The lead P-47 called the break. The formation scattered. Each pilot turned hard into the threat, trying to position for a shot, or at least force the Germans to overshoot. Holden pulled his stick back and rolled left. The Thunderbolt responded with its usual weight, slow but steady. He saw the lead Focke-Wulf flash past, too fast for a shot. Another followed, then a third. He reversed his turn, trying to stay with his flight leader. But when he looked, his leader was gone. So was his wingman. The sky that had been full of friendly aircraft 10 seconds ago was now empty except for enemies. 2 Focke-Wulfs had locked onto him. They came in from his 7 o'clock, closing fast. Holden pushed the throttle forward and dove. The Thunderbolt accelerated. The airspeed indicator climbed past 300 knots. But the 190s were faster. They stayed behind him, adjusting their angles, waiting for the right moment to fire. Holden jinked left, then right. The Germans followed. They were patient, professional. They knew they had him. A third 190 appeared above, rolling into a dive to cut him off. Now he had 2 behind and 1 ahead. The trap was closing. His heart hammered. His breath fogged the inside of his oxygen mask. The stick trembled in his hand. He could feel the Thunderbolt shaking as he pushed it harder, trying to stay ahead of the bullets he knew were coming. And then he remembered something. It was a conversation he had overheard 3 weeks earlier in the ready room. 2 British pilots, visiting from an RAF squadron, talking about a German tactic. They called it the stall trap. A maneuver where you forced your opponent to overshoot by killing your own speed at the exact wrong moment for them. The manual said never do it. Never give up speed in a dogfight. Speed is life. That was the rule. But Holden had read about something else. He had read about energy states, about how a faster plane needs more space to turn, about how a plane traveling at 400 knots cannot follow a plane traveling at 200 without overshooting. The Germans behind him were doing maybe 420. He was doing 350 and climbing. If he slowed down suddenly, drastically, they would blow past him. But the timing had to be perfect. Too early, and they would adjust. Too late, and they would shoot him out of the sky. He had one chance. Holden took a breath. Then he did the unthinkable. He chopped the throttle to idle. He pulled the stick back hard, and he extended his flaps. The Thunderbolt bucked. The nose pitched up. The airspeed bled off like water through a sieve. 350 became 300, then 250. The controls went mushy. The stall warning rattled. Behind him, the first Focke-Wulf fired. Tracer round streaked past his canopy, bright orange lines in the gray sky. But the German pilot had not expected the sudden deceleration. His bullets passed in front of Holden's nose, missing by 20 feet. The 190 flashed past on the left, so close Holden could see the pilot's helmet. The second German tried to pull up, but his speed was too high. He snap-rolled right and roared past on the other side. For one breathless moment, Holden hung in the air, his plane on the edge of a stall, the engine growling at idle. Then he shoved the throttle forward and kicked the rudder. The Thunderbolt rolled right in dove. The flaps retracted. The speed came back. And now the geometry had reversed. The two Focke-Wulfs that had been behind him were now in front of him, their energy bleeding as they tried to turn back. The third, the one that had been diving from above, had overshot and was now climbing away, out of position. Holden centered one of the 190s in his gun sight. The German was turning hard, trying to escape, but the Thunderbolt's 850 caliber machine guns did not care about elegance. Holden pressed the trigger. The guns roared. The plane shuddered. 50 caliber rounds tore across the sky and walked up the left side of the Focke-Wulf's fuselage. Metal peeled. Smoke erupted from the engine cowling. The 190 rolled inverted and fell away, trailing fire. The second German broke hard left, trying to get separation. Holden followed. His airspeed was back over 300 now. The Thunderbolt felt solid again, powerful. He pulled lead on the turning 190, waited for the angle to tighten, and fired again. This time the hits were solid. Chunks of the German's tail section blew apart. The plane snap-rolled and spun, the pilot losing control. Holden did not see if he recovered. He was already looking for the third, but the third 190 was gone. The pilot had seen enough. He had rolled out of his climb and dove for the deck, running west at full throttle. Holden did not chase. He pulled back on the stick and climbed, his eyes scanning for threats. The sky around him was empty now except for the distant contrails of bombers still heading east. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. The adrenaline made his vision sharp and narrow. He checked his fuel. He checked his ammo. Both were lower than he wanted, but enough to get home. He turned west and leveled off at 15,000 feet. The radio crackled with voices again. His flight leader was calling, asking for positions. Holden keyed his mic and reported in. His voice was steady. No one knew yet what had just happened. The flight home took 40 minutes. Holden flew alone most of the way, rejoining the scattered formation over the French coast. The other pilots gave brief reports over the radio. 1 kill confirmed. 2 probables. Some damage. Everyone was heading home. No one mentioned Holden. He was just number 4, the quiet guy who read manuals. When the formation crossed the English Channel, Holden felt the tension begin to drain from his shoulders. The white cliffs appeared below. Then the green fields. Then the runway. He landed third in the sequence. The Thunderbolt's tires chirped on the concrete. He taxied to his revetment and shut down the engine. The silence after hours of engine noise felt strange, almost fragile. The ground crew chief climbed onto the wing and popped the canopy. "How'd it go, sir?" Holden unbuckled his harness and pulled off his helmet. His hair was soaked with sweat. "Fine," he said. "Two confirmed." The crew chief blinked. "Two? Yeah. Two 190s. Gun camera should have it." The chief looked at the wings. The gun ports were blackened from firing. He nodded slowly. "I'll get the film pulled, sir." Holden climbed down and walked toward the operations building. His legs felt heavy. Other pilots were already there, smoking cigarettes, talking in groups. A few glanced at him, but said nothing. The intelligence officer called him over an hour later. They reviewed the gun camera footage in a small room with a projector. The film showed everything: the dive, the pursuit, the sudden deceleration, the overshoot, the kills. The intelligence officer watched it twice. Then he looked at Holden. "What the hell did you just do?" "I slowed down," Holden said. "You did what?" "They were faster than me, so I made them too fast." The officer stared at him. Then he made a note on his clipboard. "I'm sending this up the chain. Don't talk about it until I clear it." Holden nodded. He walked back to his barracks, lay down on his bunk, and closed his eyes. The next morning, his squadron commander called him into the office. The commander was a major from Texas, a man who had flown in North Africa and had 7 kills to his name. He was not a man who smiled often. He gestured for Holden to sit. Then he tapped a folder on his desk. "I saw your footage." "Yes, sir." "That maneuver. Where'd you learn it?" "I didn't, sir. I just figured it might work." The major leaned back in his chair. He studied Holden for a long moment. "You know that's not in the manual." "Yes, sir." "You know you could have stalled out and died." "Yes, sir." The major nodded slowly. "But you didn't. And now 2 German pilots are either dead or walking home." He paused. "You've got guts, Holden. Or you're insane. I haven't decided which." Holden said nothing. The major opened a folder and made a note. "I'm putting you in for a Silver Star, and I'm moving you to flight lead. You're not flying number 4 anymore." Holden blinked. "Sir." "You heard me." Dismissed. Holden stood, saluted, and walked out. His hands were still steady, but his mind was racing. Word spread fast. By that evening, every pilot in the squadron had seen the footage. Some thought it was brilliant. Others thought it was reckless. But none of them called him a librarian anymore. 3 days later, the maneuver had a name. The pilots started calling it Holden's Chop. Some called it the throttle trap. The mechanics called it that crazy thing the lieutenant did. But whatever they called it, everyone wanted to know if it could be taught. The answer was complicated. On March 17th, the squadron commander gathered the pilots in the briefing room. Holden stood at the front, uncomfortable under the attention. The commander asked him to walk through what he had done, step by step. Holden explained it simply. The Germans had speed advantage. They expected him to run. Instead, he killed his speed at the moment they were committed to their attack run. They overshot. The geometry reversed. He got his shots. One of the older pilots, a captain named Briggs, raised his hand. "What if they don't overshoot? What if they're going slower and can match your decile?" "Then it doesn't work," Holden said. "You'd stall and they'd shoot you. So it only works if they're going way faster than you." "Yes, sir." Another pilot spoke up. "What if there's a 4th guy you didn't see? You're sitting there slow, dead in the water. Easy target." Holden nodded. "That's the risk. You have to be sure of the tactical picture. You have to know how many there are and where they are." Briggs leaned back in his chair. "So it's a desperation move." "It was for me," Holden said. "I was out of options." The room was quiet for a moment. Then the commander stood. "Here's what I think. This maneuver is dangerous. It requires perfect timing, perfect awareness, and a lot of luck. But it works. And in a fight where you're outnumbered or outpositioned, it might be the only thing that saves you." He looked around the room. "I'm not putting this in the training syllabus, but I want everyone here to know it exists. I want you to understand the principle. Speed differential, overshoot mechanics, energy management. If you're ever in the same spot Holden was, you'll have one more tool in the box." The pilots nodded. Some made notes. Others just stared at Holden, reassessing the quiet man they had dismissed 4 months ago. After the briefing, Briggs walked up to Holden and extended his hand. "I owe you a beer." Holden shook it. "You don't owe me anything, sir." "Yeah, I do. I thought you were soft. I was wrong." Holden didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Over the next 2 weeks, Holden flew 6 more missions. He led his flight on 4 of them. He got 2 more kills, both clean, both by the book. No more desperate maneuvers. Just steady, smart flying. But the story of the throttle trap spread beyond the 356 fighter group. A report was sent to 8th Air Force headquarters. The gun camera footage was reviewed by tacticians. A colonel from the training command came to interview Holden personally. The colonel was an older man, gray at the temples, with the quiet authority of someone who had flown in the First War. He sat across from Holden in the same briefing room and asked him to explain the maneuver again. Holden did. The colonel listened without interrupting. When Holden finished, the colonel leaned forward. "Do you know why this worked, Lieutenant?" "Because they were going too fast to adjust, sir." "That's part of it, but there's something deeper." The colonel tapped the table. "You broke their expectation. Every German pilot is taught the same thing we're taught. Speed is life. Never give up speed in a fight. When you chopped your throttle, you did the one thing they were not trained to expect. And that momentary confusion, that split second where they didn't know what you were doing, that's what killed them." Holden absorbed that. The colonel continued. "War is not just about firepower or speed or numbers. It's about imposing your will on the enemy. And sometimes the best way to do that is to make them think they understand you, and then do the exact opposite." The colonel stood. "I'm recommending your footage be used in tactical briefings across the theater. Not as doctrine, but as a case study. A reminder that the manual is a guide, not a prison." He shook Holden's hand. "Good work, son." After the colonel left, Holden sat alone in the briefing room for a long time. He thought about the 2 German pilots. He wondered if they had families. He wondered if they had been scared in those last seconds. He did not feel pride. He felt weight. But he also understood something now. War rewarded the men who could think under pressure. The men who could see the shape of a problem and find the gap in it. Courage mattered. Skill mattered. But so did intellect. By April, the 356th Fighter Group had moved to a new base closer to the coast. The missions grew longer. The targets moved deeper into Germany. The Luftwaffe was still dangerous, but their numbers were thinning. Every day more Allied fighters filled the sky, and every day fewer German planes rose to meet them. Holden flew 31 missions by the end of April. He had 7 confirmed kills. He was promoted to first lieutenant. His name appeared in a Stars and Stripes article about innovative tactics. He received letters from home, from people he had never met, calling him a hero. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man doing a job, the same as every other pilot in his squadron. But something had changed. The men who flew with him trusted him now. When he called a break or a turn, they followed without hesitation. When he made a decision, they believed it was the right one. And that, more than any medal or promotion, made him feel like he belonged. On May 8th, Holden flew his final mission of the spring rotation. It was an escort run to a synthetic oil plant near Leipzig. The flak was heavy. 2 bombers went down, but the fighters stayed clear. The Luftwaffe did not show. On the flight home, Holden looked out at the formations around him. Dozens of planes, all heading west, all coming home. He thought about the maneuver that had saved his life 2 months earlier. He thought about how close he had come to dying. And he thought about how strange it was that a farm kid from Iowa, a kid who liked books more than baseball, had ended up here, leading men in the most dangerous skies in the world. When he landed, the ground crew chief was waiting. "Good flight, sir." "Quiet," Holden said. "Quiet's good." Holden smiled. "Yeah, quiet's good." That evening, the squadron held a small ceremony. Holden was awarded the Silver Star for his actions on March 14th. The commander pinned the medal to his chest in front of the entire squadron. There was no speech, just a handshake and a nod. Afterward, the pilots gathered in the officers' club. Someone bought Holden a drink, then another. He was not much of a drinker, but he accepted them. It felt like the right thing to do. Briggs sat down next to him. You ever going to do that crazy move again? Holden shook his head. Hope I never have to. But if you did? Holden thought about it. If I did, I'd make sure I understood every variable, every angle, every risk. Briggs laughed. Still the librarian. Still the librarian. Holden agreed. The war continued. Holden flew through the summer and into the fall. He survived. Many did not. He saw friends die. He saw planes explode. He saw the cost of victory measured in empty beds and silent cockpits. But he also saw the war turning. He saw the bombers hitting their targets. He saw the German fighters growing scarce. He saw the momentum shift. By the time the war in Europe ended in May 1945, Holden had flown 68 combat missions. He had 11 confirmed kills. He had been promoted to captain, and he had trained dozens of younger pilots in the principles of energy management and tactical awareness. But the thing he was remembered for, the thing that outlasted the medals and the promotions, was the maneuver. After the war, the gun camera footage from March 14, 1944, was included in the curriculum at the USAF Fighter Weapons School. It was studied by pilots in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond, not as a standard tactic, but as an example of adaptive thinking. The lesson was simple. The enemy expects you to follow the rules, and sometimes the only way to survive is to break them. Holden returned to Iowa in the fall of 1945. He married his high school sweetheart. He went to college on the GI Bill and became a teacher. He taught history and mathematics at the same high school he had graduated from. He rarely talked about the war. When students asked, he would say he had been a pilot and leave it at that. He did not mention the kills or the medals. He did not tell them about the day he chopped his throttle and turned to fight. But in 1983, a historian from the Air Force came to interview him for a book on tactical innovations. Holden was 62 years old by then, gray-haired and soft-spoken. The historian asked him what he remembered most about that day in March. Holden thought for a long time. Then he said, I remember being scared. I remember thinking I was about to die. And I remember realizing that fear is just information. It tells you the stakes are high, but it doesn't tell you what to do. You still have to think. The historian asked if he had any regrets. Holden shook his head. I did what I had to do, and I came home. A lot of men didn't. So no regrets. The historian thanked him and left. Holden sat on his porch and watched the sun set over the Iowa fields. He thought about the young man he had been, the quiet lieutenant who read manuals and asked too many questions. He wondered what that young man would think of the life he had lived. He decided the young man would be satisfied. James Holden died in 1998 at the age of 77. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II, his Silver Star, and his career as a teacher. It did not mention the throttle trap. It did not mention the footage that trained generations of fighter pilots. But in the fighter community, his name is still spoken, in the debriefs and the classrooms, in the conversations about tactics and decision-making. Someone will eventually bring up the story of the lieutenant who slowed down when everyone else would have run, because the lesson endures. It is won by men and women who can think clearly when death is 8 seconds away. It is won by the quiet ones, the ones who read and study and ask uncomfortable questions. It is won by people like James Holden. If you enjoy real World War II stories, where skill and courage change history, subscribe for more, because the greatest victories are often won not by the loudest voices, but by the sharpest minds. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do in a dogfight is exactly what the enemy does not expect.